A while back, if you asked me for my top 3 favorite games, Chrono Trigger would have been a surefire selection. But as the years have gone by, I've started to wonder about that. Especially since I really haven't replayed Chrono Trigger all that much, which is unusual for me. I tend to revisit the games that I love, maybe a bit more than I should. A huge reason why these are my favorites is that they compel me to play them over and over again. Oftentimes during these revisits, I find all new things to love. Everything from the tiniest of details that I didn't notice in the countless playthroughs prior, all the way to developing new readings and interpretations on characters, themes, and narratives. Quite frequently, I come away with a deeper connection, a deeper adoration for the game in question every time I set down the controller. But I haven't done this ritual with Chrono Trigger all that much, oddly enough. That alone calls into question its membership in my favorites club. On top of that, I do remember replaying it a couple of years ago, but I don't recall any major discoveries from that session. This has only fueled my doubts. The simple truth is that I know exactly why I've held Chrono Trigger in such high regard for so long. Chrono Trigger was the first RPG that I ever completed on my own, and its overall sensibilities were pitch perfect for my 11-year-old undiagnosed ADHD self at the time. I was just old enough to start really perceiving and grasping the world around me, but simultaneously young enough to have not lost that effortless sense of childlike wonder. So it makes sense that Chrono Trigger would completely capture my young and fertile imagination. This was the perfect time, the age where I was the most impressionable. Simply put, Chrono Trigger was formative for me, and it forged an unbreakable bond of sentimentality in my memory. But is that all it is, though? Uncritical adulation born out of nostalgic memories of childhood? Maybe, but this doesn't feel right either. As the decades have come and gone, I've noticed that I wasn't exactly alone in my praise of Chrono Trigger. From an aggregate of 92 best game of all time lists, IGN ranked Chrono Trigger 24th out of 500 qualifying games, and this is a recent figure updated in September of last year. And from my own personal anecdotes, this tracks. I've seen and heard so many people, both online and in meat space, tout it as one of the best RPGs ever made. Does Chrono Trigger truly deserve such accolades? Or did it somehow cast a spell on generations of gamers? With this burning question in mind, I decided to fire up my SNES and run it back. I needed to resolve these doubts one way or another. The time had come for me to set my sentimentality aside and look at this old favorite with a clearer, more critical perspective. Here's what I found. The first thing that greets my eyes and ears about Chrono Trigger is its incredible sense of style. Simply put, this game is gorgeous, and not just for its time either. This incredible style is thanks to a self-proclaimed dream team of Squaresoft developers. A marriage of the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy development teams, these folks were already operating at the highest levels of their craft for that era. And Chrono Trigger is no exception here. It looks, sounds, and plays exactly how a game made by such a stable of seasoned veterans should. They also display a mastery of the Super Nintendo hardware that they cultivated through years of experience, which you can clearly see by contrasting Chrono Trigger against Squaresoft's earlier works for the console, like Final Fantasy IV. This pixel art is exceptionally good. So much so that it's become a badge of honor for many a recent indie game to invoke comparisons to it. And it's more than just the vibrant color palette, the careful attention to detail, and the faithful renderings of Dragon Ball mangaka Akira Toriyama's concept art. There are plenty of impressive technical flourishes on display here as well, like the use of atmospheric layers for clouds and haze, or these flashy spell effects. And when it comes to sound design and music, Chrono Trigger is at the top of its class as well. Funny enough, this was Yasunori Mitsuda's debut as a game composer, after 4 prior titles where he worked primarily on sound effects. In an interview, he recounts how he approached Hironobu Sakaguchi and threatened to quit if he wasn't given an opportunity to compose. Luckily for Mitsuda, for Chrono Trigger, and for all of us, Sakaguchi gave him that opportunity. Mitsuda's score has since become one of the most memorable and beloved game soundtracks of all time, and for good reason. Mitsuda's music has a knack for not just capturing the mood of a particular scene, but elevating it to new heights. A few standouts that come to mind are the Gallantry of Frogs theme, the dirgy sparseness of ruined world. The mystique and splendor of the Kingdom of Zeal, and also lighthearted comedic pieces like this. While we're bringing up behind-the-scenes trivia here, it should be noted that Yasunori Mitsuda worked so hard on Chrono Trigger that he eventually ended up in the hospital with stomach ulcers. Final Fantasy's mainstay composer Nobuo Uematsu stepped in to help finish the soundtrack, contributing 10 of the 64 tracks. Now, in this instance, it was very fortunate that there was a skilled veteran waiting in the wings, but this should be taken as a cautionary tale of how harmful overwork can be. Lastly, on the topic of style, I'd like to roll in Chrono Trigger's overall production quality into this discussion. While it certainly has some major game-breaking glitches that have been found and employed by speedrunners over the decades, quality of craft here is still top-notch, especially given the tools and technology of the time. Games of this era were frequently done in assembly language, which is to say that these developers got by without many of the quality of life conveniences we modern programmers enjoy. Despite the myriad of very easy ways to screw up in assembly code, trust me, I have first-hand experience here, the Chrono Trigger team delivered a highly polished, performant, and stable piece of software. Beyond its alluring style, what also struck me about Chrono Trigger was that it was simple. Don't take that as a pejorative. If anything, I find Chrono Trigger to be a showcase in the elegance of simplicity. There is a wisdom to keeping things as uncomplicated as possible, and it can be quite refreshing to experience something that is, well, unpretentious. This simplicity is most apparent in Chrono Trigger's mechanics and systems. In a word, they're streamlined. The team at Squaresoft took many of the systems they had developed for Final Fantasy and their other titles and opted for a back-to-basics approach here. The stat sheet is boiled down to the fundamentals. Instead of massive menus with an unwieldy number of spells and abilities, we're presented with an all-killer, no-filler set of options for characters. The number of status effects and magical elements are also scaled down rather aggressively. Such streamlining enabled the development team to shift complexity away from the player's options, and instead refocus it towards encounter design. Battles in Chrono Trigger pick up a degree of sophistication as a result. Enemies have considerably more complex logic, state changes, and interactions than prior Squaresoft titles. Take, for instance, the jugglers, who swap between physical and magical defenses, or how the reptiles attack these volcano enemies to AoE the party. In lieu of memorizing a bunch of rules regarding magic systems or whatnot, the player must instead adapt to each new encounter, learning the various quirks and interactions of these new monsters. Simplifying RPG combat in this way also serves the experience that Chrono Trigger strives to deliver. That is, it's primarily a fun romp, an adventure designed for children. Again, this shouldn't be taken as a criticism. We see this with Chrono Trigger's straight-ahead plot. The future of the world lies in ruins, and our team of heroes resolve to use their newly discovered time travel ability to prevent this apocalypse from happening. Our primary antagonist is Lavos, an implacable creature that acts more as a force of nature than as a character. This journey to eventually defeat Lavos and save the future is governed primarily by the rule of fun, where we'll have to battle evil wizards, malfunctioning robots, and sentient dinosaurs along the way. This is a simple story told in a simple way, while also making ample room for some frivolity and spectacle. Again, there's wisdom in this sort of approach. A third major appeal of Chrono Trigger comes from its novel features and innovations. For example, the game is the codifier of the term New Game Plus. The general concept existed in several games before Chrono Trigger, like the original Legend of Zelda's Second Quest, but this is where the term was coined. Chrono Trigger also receives plenty of adulation for the ways it freshened up JRPG conventions, most notably in how it does away with random encounters, which are usually governed by the player's step count on map sections, a feature frequently derided in the Final Fantasy series. Not only does Chrono Trigger allow the player to see potential battles and give them the opportunity to duck around them, they're fought in the exact same place where the player is exploring. No more switching back and forth from a map or dungeon scene to a separate battle scene, a frequently disorienting and disruptive experience for many who play classic JRPGs. Another major innovation of Chrono Trigger were its double and triple techs, where characters combine their abilities into more powerful ones. This certainly introduces a nice tactical element to battles, especially together with Chrono Trigger's use of area of effect and multi-target abilities. Combining one character's powerful single target spell with another character's AoE ability allows that spell now to hit multiple targets. This creates plenty of situations where the player must weigh the benefit of these dual techs against the costs of two characters' turns. Sometimes it's the right play, but other times the player might be better off by having those characters each perform their own turn. Chrono Trigger also plays with storytelling expectations and gameplay conventions to mess with the player in an interesting way. I go into depth about this in a video on my other channel that I'm also releasing today, so be sure to go check that out if that sounds interesting. Another bit of a novelty is Chrono Trigger's nonchalant approach to gender parity. 3 of the 7 playable characters are women, all of whom are shown to be quite capable both in the narrative and in their combat roles. Now, Marl and Luca don't stand out all that much in the greater context of Squaresoft's games. They're respectively a white mage and black mage duo in the mold of Rosa and Rydia as seen in Final Fantasy IV, or later on in Final Fantasy X with Yuna and Lulu. But here enters Ayla, our physical powerhouse specialist, who fights all manner of baddies from machines to dinosaurs to eldritch beings with her bare hands. Story-wise, our gals prove equally invaluable. Luca demonstrates her engineering proficiency by learning and harnessing the ability to open the time gates, and by also repairing Robo. Ayla is the chief of the Ioka tribe and humanity's fiercest warrior in its battle against the Reptites, and by observing her interactions with her partner Kino, it becomes obvious who the top in this relationship is. The fact that Chrono Trigger features these 3 women and treats them decently shouldn't be remarkable. But nowadays, unfortunately, gaming has been infested with a very vocal minority of outrage merchants who take umbrage anytime they see a woman video game character that isn't designed solely for their leering fantasies. If Chrono Trigger came out today, we would no doubt be hearing their insipid commentary about how Luca is somehow a Mary Sue, a term so divorced from its original critique that it's pretty much useless now, or questioning how Ayla got so buff when they don't see any gyms around Ioka Village. These outrage merchants frequently assert that the inclusion of women or any person of marginalized identity in video games nowadays is some recent conspiracy of wokeness or DEI or whatever boogeyman they're moving on to next. That a landmark game like Chrono Trigger did this decades ago is a pretty clear demonstration that these people have no clue what they're talking about. And lastly, another couple of novelties that Chrono Trigger can claim are its array of multiple endings and its use of minigames. As far as endings go, they change depending on where, when, and how the player defeats Lavos, as well as whether or not they completed certain side quests. This certainly motivates the New Game Plus feature, rewarding curious and diligent players. For the minigames, there's something of an experiment here in Chrono Trigger, a bit of a sporadic mode switch out of the usual JRPG town and dungeon game loop. But what's seen here lays the foundation for the wonderful minigame segments of later Squaresoft games such as Super Mario RPG and Final Fantasy VII. Chrono Trigger is stylish, delightfully simple, and innovative. These 3 aspects capture its appeal pretty succinctly, and effectively explain why it's been so revered over the decades. But as I played through it again recently, these core strengths are also indicative of some of Chrono Trigger's weaknesses. For all its style, I find Chrono Trigger to be somewhat lacking in substance. What do I mean by substance? Well, substance can be all manner of things, but my focus is primarily on narrative and how much the gameplay experience stands out in a crowd. A game with substance will noticeably stir or incite feelings and emotions in its players. A game with substance will ponder interesting and unique thoughts and perspectives. It will make a statement with its themes. Its characters will be deep, complex, and relatable people with rich internal lives. A game with substance will create and maintain a novel, unique experience via deliberate design and through continued play, not just fleeting gimmicks. Now, I did say before that I feel Chrono Trigger is an adventure designed for children. Certainly, I'm not expecting a weighty character study or a political thriller or a treatise on societal relations. I'm not expecting Chrono Trigger to buck or toy with video game conventions in any major way. But at the same time, using the excuse that something is made for children as a means to deflect criticism about a lack of substance, well, that's a cop-out from where I sit. There are plenty of works aimed at a younger audience that are just, well, excellent art for any audience. The original Avatar: The Last Airbender comes to mind. I don't know why I said original there, it's not like it's been adapted at all, right? Anyhow, Avatar: The Last Airbender provides the kid-friendly romp and visual spectacle that Chrono Trigger aims for, but it also isn't afraid to address some heavy subject matter: imperialism, colonization, propaganda, how trauma impacts individuals and cultures. Its characters undergo impressive arcs, and at various points throughout the series they experience conflict within themselves and conflict between each other. They have moments when their personal failings get the best of them, and other times where they step forward and grow as people. And it's in the characters where I feel like Chrono Trigger is most lacking. Our main hero, Chrono, is a stock silent protagonist, an empty vessel for the player to project themselves into. Lavos, as I previously mentioned, isn't really a character unto itself, but more of a force of nature villain that cannot be reasoned with. Among the other characters, we don't really see any meaningful flaws, and there's no real conflict, internal or interpersonal, to speak of. There's even a moment which should cause a huge conflict between characters, but it's just kinda shrugged off, I'm guessing primarily for gameplay purposes. And sure, some of the cast have tiny arcs, such as Frog needing to overcome his self-doubt before he answers the call of his rather boilerplate hero's journey. All in all, though, when there's an opportunity to make a character more deep and complex, Chrono Trigger tends to steer away from it. Queen Zeal, for instance, has potential to be a really compelling villain. We learned that she used to be a loving mother towards Shala and Janice, but something changed in her as she started gathering more and more power. This has all the makings for some really compelling character tension, as her greed directly jeopardizes the lives of her children. But nothing comes of this. In the end, she proves to be utterly callous and unredeemable, her humanity forfeit. Luca has a traumatic experience from her childhood that only gets brought up in one optional side quest. It's something that should inform her character throughout the entire run of the story, but it just doesn't. It's a bit of backstory and nothing more, and that's a shame. The time travel premise also feels underutilized, especially since there aren't many meaningful player choices in the game. There is one involving a character, but it feels rather hollow when you weigh the outcomes. Choosing one way offers a pretty substantial reward in terms of gameplay benefits, while the other doesn't really offer much of anything. But, in fairness, this might be the game making a statement. Deciding the fate of a seed in the Kingdom of Zeal feels like a similarly hollow choice, though the running motif of seeds as symbols of hope is a nice touch, all said. Likewise, the decision to make Chrono Trigger a highly linear experience also feels somewhat disappointing given the potential of time travel. Now, I will go on record and say that linearity is not bad in itself. When people complain about linearity in games, they're oftentimes complaining about a complete suffocation of player agency instead. Linearity provides structure and pacing, and Chrono Trigger is definitely a more cohesive experience by following a pretty tight linear path. Still, the time travel premise is just so ripe for some exciting non-linear possibilities, which Chrono Trigger sadly leaves on the table. All in all, my criticism is that while it has style out the wazoo, Chrono Trigger doesn't have a lot of depth backing it up. Which dovetails nicely to my next point. Chrono Trigger deserves a lot of credit for boiling down JRPG systems to their fundamentals. By stripping away some of the bloat and excess complexity, we're presented with a distilled core gameplay that is easy to grasp. But at times, I find Chrono Trigger goes too far in this effort, where this minimalistic elegance begins to degrade into simplistic shallowness. Where this is most readily apparent is in the combat design. Specifically, there's really only one major curveball to the game's systems: magic. Shortly after the first few quests, we encounter enemies that practically can only be defeated by magic spells. To get past this barrier, the party must visit Specchio at the end of time to unlock their magic abilities, which happens midway through the first act of the game. And that's pretty much it in terms of changing up or adding complexity to the battle mechanics. Higher level spells gain the ability to target all enemies on screen, but past that, the only difference between most of the magic techs is their base spell power. So, functionally speaking, they deal more damage and maybe have cooler animations, but that's about it. This would be a much larger issue, but as I mentioned earlier, Chrono Trigger's encounter design works overtime to cover for the lack of meaningful depth here. We see this in enemies with contextual weaknesses, gimmicky boss battles, and encounter formations where the player will need to carefully consider whether to use single target, AoE, or multi-target techs. Great gameplay systems fall apart when a game's content fails to showcase or utilize said systems properly. What we see here is a bit of the opposite. This is good content maximizing the mileage of thin systems. Status effects also feel like an afterthought here, like something implemented out of an obligation to follow other Squaresoft RPGs of the time. For one, there doesn't seem to be a ton of enemies who inflict status effects for most of the game, and the ones who do seem to have a low success rate. This does change for some of the late game dungeons, however, but the player also has access to equipment to protect against status effects at this point. And of these statuses, most don't feel all that impactful outside of maybe Lock, Chaos, or the exceptionally rare Stop. Likewise, the player has few options of their own to inflict status ailments, and again, their hit rate and overall effectiveness really seem to limit their utility to a few choice situations. One that comes to mind is that Isla and Robo's double tech, Boogie, is very effective in the Golem Twins boss fight, which I learned from watching speedruns. While I'm discussing the ways in which Chrono Trigger's simplicity goes a bit too far, I mentioned its minigames earlier. Yeah, they're not particularly great. A button mashing competition, Simon Says, this rather crude racing sequence. While using minigames in this way did pave the way for much better examples in later Squaresoft games, this does raise the question, is being innovative enough? To be frank, I think the answer is no. Don't get me wrong, I love it when games try something new. That's definitely a behavior that I want to encourage. But when you add some novelty or innovation to a video game, I really can't award full credit if you don't completely flesh out these features and concepts. New Game Plus is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. As discussed earlier, Chrono Trigger didn't invent it, but the game certainly became one of the most well-known examples of the concept. But have you played through Chrono Trigger New Game Plus anytime recently? Because, being honest, I found it a bit of a slog. The enemies and encounters don't scale up in New Game Plus, while your characters maintain all their experience and equipment, minus key items from your prior playthrough. With the way power scales, especially in the late game, this means you won't face any challenge at all as you one-shot bosses and the like for a majority of the game. Now, there is a reason New Game Plus is included here, but that reason is not as an engaging experience on its own merits. It's here to facilitate the game's many endings. I personally went for and did the ending where you beat Lavos at the Ocean Palace, which if you know, you know. Now, being able to dodge encounters certainly helped mitigate the tedium of playing through half the game all over again with practically zero challenge. That having been said, how much better is this approach to the random encounters of the Final Fantasy games? Perhaps I have a higher tolerance for random battles than most, but I don't think the quality of life improvement is all that much. There is still a fair number of scripted encounters, and there's also more than a few very difficult to avoid ambushes. As for the time saved from not having to do a scene transition, well, you still have to wait for combatants to shuffle over into their designated spots, so it's frequently a wash. Coming back to the endings, there's 12 of them in total, and that sounds impressive. But 9 of them are joke endings, arguably. That leaves 3 real endings, the first being the canonical To Faraway Times ending, which has a bit of varying circumstances based on how you took down Lavos and what side quests you completed. The second real ending involves skipping a rather major quest, and the third is the Developer's Room, aka the Completionist ending. Now, I will say that my count here doesn't include the non-standard Game Over ending, which I think is a pretty awesome flourish and something I wish games would do more frequently. This is where I end up with Chrono Trigger's novelties and innovations. There are amusing diversions, but not much more. Even dual techs, which are a very neat twist on JRPG combat abilities. They unfortunately start to lose value as the game goes on from a turn economy perspective. So many of these little flourishes and experiments could be absolutely amazing additions to the game, but ultimately come off as hollow. So with all of this in mind, let's get back to the question at hand. Is Chrono Trigger overrated? Or to put it another way, do I think Chrono Trigger is the 24th best game ever made? With all sincerity, as much as it pains me to say it, no, I don't. As a critic evaluating Chrono Trigger against its contemporaries, I'm not sure it would be my first, second, or even third pick. Super Mario RPG delivers a more engaging and fun, lighthearted romp, with intriguing deviations from the JRPG formula and vastly improved minigames. Final Fantasy VI is far more deep and substantial in almost every aspect, from systems to story. Earthbound's solution to the random encounter issue is better developed and nails a distinct and delightfully weird vibe. But to be further honest with you, I kinda hate the notion of overrated. There's an underlying accusation of unworthiness in there, that the work in question somehow swindled undeserved praise through guile and deceit. What I frequently find of most allegedly overrated things is that they're still quite good, but have somehow stumbled onto more popularity than many people think they should have. Interrogating this, I find it's usually people upset that a work of similar quality didn't get the same amount of shine. In this case, I find the overrated label to be misguided. Instead of trying to take this other good thing down a peg, I would encourage people to raise those other worthy books, films, and games to the popular acclaim that they deserve. This isn't a zero-sum game, because, make no mistake, Chrono Trigger is a great game. While its style could use more substance, and at times it's overzealous in simplifying JRPG systems, and it fails to fully develop some novel elements here and there, it is still a well-made game and an all-around fun experience. And thinking about it, while I do prefer Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI, and Super Mario RPG today, I wouldn't have come to that conclusion if I hadn't played Chrono Trigger first. Quite simply, Chrono Trigger truly is a stylish, simple, and innovative game, and there's amazing value in that. If you've been looking to explore classic JRPGs or to better understand the game's influence by them, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better introduction. It certainly did the trick for 11-year-old me. Regardless of whatever critical opinion I may have, I still love Chrono Trigger, and not just because of my sentimental attachments to it. Contrary to popular opinion, loving something isn't a denial of its flaws. I find that real love is acknowledging someone or something for what they are, taking the highs and lows holistically, and still moving forward in and with affection. Is Chrono Trigger overrated? Who cares? Thanks for watching. If this video was like an Enertron for you, where you feel energized but are still hungry for more Chrono Trigger, be sure to check out this video here on my other channel. Also, like, comment, subscribe. Catch you next time.